Is everybody ready to karaoke? Okay, here we go. Hi everyone, I'm Karen Cabral. I'm with Surge Montgomery County, and obviously with the TIA volunteer admin team is what we're calling ourselves. And so we'll just do a quick introduction of the admins and who's from where. So.
Okay. Roxanne Weiss, ACLU Montgomery County. Thank you all my ACLU people for coming.
Hi, I'm Jamie Uwugo, and I'm
Please speak into the microphone.
Sorry. Jamie Uwugo, and I'm with Tacoma Mobilization.
I'm Pam Stuckey. I'm with Surge MoCo.
Okay.
I'm Lisa Siegel. I'm from Direct Support for Immigrants. We're a nonprofit that grew out of the Tacoma Park Mobilization's Immigration Committee, and we were a subcommittee of the Immigration Committee, but we are now our own nonprofit, and still part of the Tacoma Park Mobilization.
I'm Gina McNeil. I'm also with Surge MoCo, that stands for Showing Up for Racial Justice, in the Montgomery County chapter.
And Angela Wolf with DSI, Direct Support for Immigrants.
Thanks. Great.
I think Pete and I will tell you a little bit about what's happening at the border and what's happening in detention, and then Pam is going to kind of share exactly how this project got started.
So yeah, I joined DSI when I came back from Texas. That was the first time I was in Texas. I felt called to go down because the largest children's prison camp was there, which was supposed to be temporary, and it wasn't temporary. The Trump administration said they were going to close it in the summer. They didn't close it. They made it larger and larger and larger. It was called Tornillo. And I have friends in the area, activists down there still, and the CBS News story about it recently said, oh, it's shut down, all the kids are gone. Well, my activist friends that are watching it closely say that it's not entirely shut down, that they believe that now it's being a family detention center. And there's 96 other children, immigrant children, prison camps, or they call them detention centers. We call them, us involved in this, prison camps. And there's a law, basically an agreement that came through a settlement, that there's something called the Flores Agreement, which says you can't keep immigrant children, unaccompanied immigrant children, 20 days separate from their family or an adult sponsor responsible for them. And the kids in Tornillo, many had been there 5 months, 6 months. The people that were hired to work there were given 4-hour training. A lot of them were not speaking Spanish. They were told not to look the kids in the eyes, not to have any physical contact with the kids. And HHS was also in violation of its own regulations. The people working there were not giving background fingerprint checks. So there's going to be a lot more stories coming out about abuse and so forth. But yeah, it was an eye-opening experience. And then when I came back, I was like, well, that's one end of the story. What happens to these folks, after a 3.5 day Greyhound bus ride? And so I wanted to get involved in this end. And in the spring, I hope to go to Homestead, Florida, and do a little bit of witnessing outside of that prison camp in Homestead, Florida, which is run by a company that has had legal problems in the past, and its parent company is about to go for an IPO. So there's a lot of people in these 96, 97 children prison camps that some are run by nonprofits, but there's a whole bunch that are making money off of this. So that's all I have to say, really. Oh, I left information back on that table by the historic Tacoma Park. One was a recent, maybe it's been, there's a recent story about Tornillo, and then a little sheet about Annunciation House. That's an organization in El Paso that's been doing this for 25 or 30 years. They do amazing work. They serve, on average, 300 refugees a day. So there's a little bit of information about Annunciation House and how you can donate to. I volunteered a couple days when I was down. They were just amazing. Thanks. Thanks for coming.
So I'm just going to explain generally what what happens when an immigrant crosses the border. So oftentimes they'll come on a raft, sometimes they'll cross on a bridge, and when they get into Texas or Arizona or wherever they land, usually within minutes they will get picked up by Border Patrol, and they will be put into detention. The migrants that we're seeing arrive here, more than 50% of the adults are bringing children with them. So it's many times a single parent, so a mom or dad with 1 or 2 children, usually just 1, but sometimes 2. But there are also single adult travelers. And so the single adult travelers will end up in detention, and they will need to go through the court system with a judge and pay a bond, like be given a bond by a judge and then pay that bond in order to be released. And so the single adult travelers that we're seeing arriving at the bus station often have paid this bond, and then once they've landed here where they're going to be staying, they'll need to wait to find out when their court date is in probably in Baltimore if they're landing in Maryland. For the parents who are traveling with kids, they're getting released much quicker, so it could be within a couple days. That's what's happening right now. Obviously, things change quickly, and the policies of the administration have changed very much in the last 2 years. But what seems to be happening right now is that people get out within 3 days, and they often are being released on their own recognizance. So they're not having to pay a bond, and they're kind of signing a document saying, I'm going to follow these rules, and then ICE will be kind of supervising them. And then they're allowed to make their way to their destination, and when they arrive here, they usually have an ICE check-in within 1 week of their arrival. Some of the parents are also required to undergo even more supervision, and they're given an ankle bracelet. So some of the parents will be coming through with an ankle bracelet that was given to them by ICE, and they will need even more check-ins with ICE and kind of have more onerous requirements. So that's, and one of the reasons we suspect that they're being released so quickly in detention right now is because the conditions have been really terrible, and not just overcrowding, but illness. So we've heard reports of migrants that have arrived who have reported to us that they've seen people die, a pregnant mother, children die in detention. These are not verified reports, so we have not been able to verify them, but we understand that there's a lot of illness, and some of those migrants are, arriving here with illness as well. So that's going to be an issue for us once they get here. And I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
Thank you. Have I got this right? One thing, I'm responsible for explaining just how we got started as a group. And we got, a couple of us are part, we mentioned, or 3 of us are part of Surge Montgomery County. And so we were notified that there was a need, there were immigrants traveling up the East Coast. And so we got together, started talking amongst ourselves, grabbed a few other people who were motivated to help us. That was around Thanksgiving. And we pretty much jumped in. We knew it was going to be a pilot. We knew we were going to have to be flexible. We initially, based on what we were hearing, we thought it's useful to have some supplies to be able to present to people. And so we very quickly got on that. We were very organized, and then we started greeting people at the Silver Spring bus station. And let's see, sorry, I lost my focus. We also realized that we started reaching out to Spanish. Obviously we need more Spanish-speaking volunteers. So we started reaching out, and we luckily found a good core group. And then we combined with DSI, because obviously our missions were similar. And we also combined with DSI because we realized, initially we were thinking that we were going to be more like a transfer station, which is what a lot of other stations that's what they are. They have people who get off the bus and then get on a different bus, and they have a little more time to greet people. We realized we were a destination location, so people were going to be getting off. So we realized we need to start to have information to share, like a la what Lisa was saying, so that we could assist people in getting to their ICE hearings and make sure they were well informed about what either physical resources or legal resources might be available to them in this area. Then just to explain how we get information, what's actually really encouraging to see, and maybe people have some idea about this ahead of already, via the news source, via the news. There have been some pieces that people may have heard about. There was one particular piece about abuelas in Sacramento working on this project. But there's people all along the east that we can see, at least from the source that we have, which is primarily a national Facebook page. So we get a sense of where people are. We get a sense of the sort of the triage or the chain of travel. And on this Facebook page, we're able to get reports from primarily Memphis and Knoxville initially, and then it goes up through Charlottesville and Richmond. And so we do get a heads up about the travelers we might expect in Silver Spring. It's not precise, it's not perfect, but we get an idea ahead of time, usually about 24 hours in advance. And then, so that's one place where we get the information about the travelers we expect. And then we also have a separate way to get information, which is the signal thread, which hopefully everybody had some heads up about. It's a secure way to communicate. And so we get further, more precise information often from Charlottesville and Richmond, and sometimes, strangely enough, from Baltimore, because some of the travelers are stuck with some crazy routes where they get routed to Baltimore to then head back down south to Silver Spring. Often, sometimes, too late to actually catch the bus back to Silver Spring before the next morning. I want to make sure I hit all the key points. And what we do see, just again, that's encouraging, is you can see from the threads of the people on the Facebook page that the travelers, the migrants are being, well cared for as much as we can from large numbers of volunteers, especially I think in all the stations. There are a lot of volunteers, and so they're being provided clothing, they're being provided medicine, they're being provided food. It's very encouraging, especially in today's world, to see the evidence of all the people, combating the craziness that we see right now. Let's see. And to the point that I just want to say there's some really nice touches where people have, one person said there's a kid who needs a book in Spanish, and somebody managed to find a book in Spanish. And then, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. And then, obviously people have questions. We'll be glad to answer them afterward. Do you want me to start on the next? I have the next part too. Yeah. So I get to follow myself. I'm also going to speak on the. I just want to say, this is still nerve-wracking for me. Doing my best. Obviously the key role that we have is to show up at the Silver Spring bus station and greet people. And so I'm just going to start with, as you're planning your day, if you're going to be one of the greeters. First of all, I'll just discuss quickly the parking. Don't forget to bring change. And there's also there actually is a really great parking space literally right in front of the bus station, and then 2 right behind it. So if you're lucky, you'll get one of those 2. And those 3, it's just, if you miss that, just around the corner is the public parking. You guys may have already scoped this out, but if you haven't, I'll just give you the heads up on that. And it's helpful to have parking close by, because we do have supplies that we're bringing. And so it could be you want to get some extra stuff out of the car. You may have, if people had a chance to do the reading, we hope to have 2 volunteers for each time that we're meeting migrants. And so that'd be one English speaker and one Spanish speaker. And you're hoping that people are bringing, or, you know, 2 Spanish speakers is great. We would be providing supplies, which we're hoping everybody will take a look at the end of the talk. So it rather than us going through every little detail, it's easier to just see them. And we also really are hoping everybody is going to be able to share this piece of paper that talks about DSI. We really, really want everybody that we can, every migrant that we can, we want to have this piece of paper with the phone numbers of 2 people who will speak Spanish to them and be able to explain the legal process and help them along, because that is really ultimately, yeah, this form here. Yeah, because obviously, ultimately, that's the most important thing I think that we can do for people, the people that we're meeting. And so, we hope people get there a little bit early. Gina's going to talk about the, we'll give you the heads up about when we let people know when we think the bus is going to be there. There's some standard times the buses get into the Silver Spring station, but obviously it's not perfect. 95 alone tells you that there's a chance they're not going to be on time. But there is a way to track. Once you know you're supposed to go meet somebody, we advise everybody to check in on the Greyhound bus tracker, which it's pretty easy to follow. It's not perfect either. So we have sometimes missed buses because the information on that was incorrect. One time in particular, like it said, the bus is going to be an hour late, and then 2 minutes later, the bus was on time. But we'd already left and couldn't get back in time. So, but I mean, it's just a point that we're doing our best. We don't expect this to be perfect. We know we're doing something good. But I definitely advise everybody to get familiar with the Greyhound bus tracker and definitely use it. And maybe if people have questions about it afterward, let me know. You can also theoretically call Greyhound if you have other questions, but it's a little complicated. Usually talking to people in the Philippines. Let's see. And the other thing to know about is that like I said, we get a heads up about what passengers we expect, but we have often seen there are more people than that who get off the bus that we didn't know about. So we try to greet, we can usually identify the people that we were supposed to meet, because often it is very often a parent and a child. And they're also easily identified because they have, they're carrying their belongings in grocery bags or big white plastic bags. So we try to meet those people and just, but then often there's some other people we can meet as well. And there's a script, suggestions about how to communicate that's especially pertinent to all the people who are speaking Spanish. But that's just a guideline for how we can approach everybody, because really the main thing is you want to, whatever works for the Spanish-speaking person, our Spanish-speaking greeter, whatever works the best for you to build rapport with the person, that's all that matters, because otherwise they're not going to talk to you. They've obviously all been, I don't need to say, they've been traumatized. And also a lot of times they're almost immediately greeted by their family or friends. So that's encouraging, and it's amazing to see, it's heartwarming to see that those times, but we're still hoping to somehow subtly insert ourselves to be able to make sure they have the DSI information primarily, but then also to, if there's some other assistance that they might need. So sometimes the Spanish-speaking greeters are able to actually even look at some of the paperwork that they're all carrying, and then just double check and see, oh, look, yeah, your ICE hearing is like 2 days from now. Let's see how we can help you. But again, that needs to be coordinated through DSI. And then another ideal situation, which is hard to make happen, but it's ideal, is if the Spanish-speaking volunteer has created enough rapport the person is willing to provide their phone number to us, because then we will be right on top of it and contacting them. But I think all of us can recognize, like, they have a lot of good reason to not provide any contact information to us, so it's totally dependent on that information. And then, so we are the same, so I mean, I emphasized about the information, but the other part is we obviously want to be providing the supplies that we have. And we have some bags that are specifically created for adults, and then we also have some miscellaneous supplies that we can give to children, and everybody hopefully brings a big bag of stuff with them to share. And then the other thing that obviously is a volunteer that we're responsible for is if there was somebody who seemed ill, we have the opportunity to reach out to somebody who's gonna, and Dr. Sugarman will be talking later about this. So that's one of the emergency situations we want to be prepared to address. And then sometimes there's an issue with the person actually getting a ride, although I'm not sure I know it's happened one time where we had to provide, some transportation somewhere. And sometimes the person just has to wait, in which case we would try to wait with them, and we would also help them get some food. And that is the thing, anybody who's waiting, we have the option of crossing the street over to 7-Eleven, or Manny and Olga's, and getting them some food, and everybody will be reimbursed. And let's see. So the last part, we want to make sure that people don't overpromise what we can do. Don't, say you're going to do something that you can't do. Try to get them connected to DSI. Understand that these people have been traumatized. And then, again, after we're done with our presentation, everybody can take a look at the supplies, just their basic items. And then I'm just going to put a word out, like, anybody who knows folks who are Spanish speakers, we can just use more. So, thank you.
So I'm Gina, Pam and I are the dispatchers, and I'm just going to talk very briefly about how we actually let you know what you're supposed to do if you're greeting a bus. And we depend a lot on technology, so I want to say up front that if you are the kind of person who are not, if you're not comfortable using your phone, using apps on your phone, then probably you shouldn't choose the bus greeter role, because we really do depend on that. You could probably do one of the other roles just by having somebody, phone you and ask you if you can volunteer. But for the bus greeter, we are online with each other all day, every day, and it can change every 5 minutes. So A, you have to be able to be comfortable with technology on your phone, and B, you have to be willing to get a lot of messages through the app that we have. A lot. You can always, obviously turn it off or whatever so that you don't have to hear beep, 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 but I will tell you up front, it's a ton of traffic, so just know that. So what we do, I think Pam talked briefly, she said that as people come up from Texas, so they're making their way, from Texas down here, all the way up through these stations, and then they end up in Charlottesville, and then Richmond, and then DC, Silver Spring, Baltimore. So all along the way, there are people meeting the buses, and what they do is they start, not only do they feed them on the way, and give them clothes and that kind of thing, but they start asking them, where are you going? What's your final destination? Because this couldn't work unless we knew that we were going to receive them. So they will actually give destinations, Silver Spring, I'm going to Springfield, I'm going to Dover, Delaware, whatever. And so we have a national Facebook page that's called NITA, it's National Immigration Transit Assistance, and all the different stations share information on that page. So Pam and I are on that page, and so we will see usually the day before, but often it's early in the day, so I might get up in the morning and already there's a message from somewhere in Tennessee telling me that there are people bound for Silver Spring, and they will often say it's going to be a mom and a 2-year-old and a man and a teenager and then one unaccompanied teen or something like that. So and if you can't stay, you'll let me know, or Pam, through the thread, and we will send somebody in your place. So you need to get, if you're going to be a bus greeter, you have to use an app called Signal, and anybody that's already gotten in touch with us, I've already asked you to get the Signal thread. And as soon as you get the Signal, so what it is, it's just a chat. It's like WhatsApp. It's similar to that, but it's private, it's untraceable, and it's what activist groups often will use. So you'll get Signal, And then we will add you to the thread that's called TIA Silver Spring, and it's basically for all of us that are gonna be meeting buses on a regular basis. We're all on there together because we wanna share information with each other, and that's why there's so much traffic. So, you don't have to look at it unless it's your day, and you're gonna use a Sign Up Genius, so that's just on the web, Sign Up Genius, to sign up for your shift. And we're gonna have shifts 7 days a week. Right now, it's just 3 to 6, but we may end up with other shifts later as we deal with what Pam mentioned, where we are also getting a stream of people, well, not as many, but some, going to Baltimore and back down to Silver Spring.
Just-
Okay.
It's hard to read.
I'm sorry?
It's very, we can't read what you're writing.
Okay, it's just,
The darker pen.
thank you, oh, okay. All I wrote is Signal, which is the name of the app that you use, and the Sign Up Genius. All of this is on your training document too. So anyway, you'll sign up with the Sign Up Genius. If your day is Thursday and you're signed up, you can ignore the Signal thread the rest of the time. But on Thursday, you need to read it all day, every single message all day, because things change a lot. And we find out that people, we think they're coming, then they're not. We think they're not coming, and then they are. That's what happened today. We find out sometimes who needs a coat or whatever. And let's see what else I'm supposed to cover. Oh, for each shift, like we said, we have a Spanish speaker and a second person who may or may not speak Spanish. We also have a trainee slot for people that haven't gone before. You can sign up as a trainee and you can go with other people so you can see how to do it. I told you about the backup list. We would like people to sign up for the backup list in addition to being regularly scheduled volunteers if you can, because the bigger our backup list is. So if you think, okay, I'm available, most of the time, but I'll just sign up for 1 shift a week and then put myself on the backup list, that really helps us. The other thing that happens with the backup list is if somebody is on the bus and they get off and they're sick and they need to be taken to the clinic or something, we might see if somebody can give them a ride, either that day or the next day. Or we might ask you to go to the house and get some, clothing in an emergency or something. It would just be all kinds of emergencies is what the backup is for. Let's see. We get passengers most days of the week, not every day. So you might be scheduled and there's nobody coming and then you don't have to go. If you want to go, you can, in case you think that, because we do believe that sometimes there are people on the bus that we didn't know about. You're welcome to do it. Angela does that a lot. When she has a shift, she'll go anyway, in case somebody's there. You're absolutely welcome to do it. You don't have to.
So we're going to present together. I'm Kate Sugarman. I'm a primary care doctor. I treat adolescents and adults. I do not treat children. I'm speaking as an individual, not as an employee of my clinic, but I do work for a large nonprofit clinic called Unity Healthcare, and my site is called Upper Cardozo Clinic, and it's at 14th Street and Columbia Road, 14th Street and Irving Street, right next to the Columbia Heights Metro Station. So we're just going to give you some pointers because, unless you all are treating, clinicians, physicians, nurse practitioners, or physician's assistants, we in no way, shape, or form want you to be in a position of treating somebody or deciding somebody is sick. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to the newly arrived immigrants. So I don't want you in that position. And we're happy for that to be on our shoulders and not on your shoulders. So just my own personal background, I've been working with asylum seekers for over 10 years now, and so I'm well acquainted with the asylum process, and also I know many asylum lawyers. Many are bad, some are good, so that's a different topic, but I would really like to talk about that because panicked immigrants will put down a lower price for a very bad lawyer, and then when the lawyer screws up their case, then they don't have the money to then hire a good lawyer. It happens more often than we would like. Different conversation. So just a few examples of what has happened to immigrants. I think it was over the summer, a 2-year-old girl died. She was with her mother in the Dilley family detention, the Dilley family prison camp. And while she was there, she became very sick and was throwing up, was being given oral antibiotics for like an ear infection or for pneumonia, but kept throwing up the antibiotics. And ICE medical care is abysmal usually, or I've seen cases where ICE medical care is abysmal. And if somebody's throwing up the antibiotics, they should have given her IV, put her in a hospital, but they did nothing. Instead, they released her, so she immediately arrived with her mother to New Jersey, went to the doctor in New Jersey, then went to the hospital, and then died. It was too late, really horrible. So, we'll talk about these kind of cases, how to jump in as soon as you can if you have any doubt, any question. On the lighter, on the happier side, during the time of family separation, a lovely attorney from Virginia went down to the border and got a family reunited. The lawyer's name is Eileen Blessinger, and a volunteer in Texas called me and she said, "Oh my God, this family's coming to Washington D.C. Mom just had a miscarriage. We don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah." By the time I saw the mother, her miscarriage had been completed. There's nothing to do, but at least it was nice. The family was able to come to our clinic, get linked to care, and so at least the family had a medical home. And the kids wanted to start school right away, so they were able to come, get their vaccines immediately. No barriers to entering school. The almighty physical form that kids need. And as far as this group, I got an email, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, that somebody was coughing, they didn't know what to do, and fortunately through Roxanne and Ana Sol Gutierrez, they came to our clinic the next day. It turned out it was just like a cold or something like that, but that night everybody was nervous, and so it worked out that they got linked to care the next morning. So I think, Anna, you'll talk about children, and then I'll talk about adults.
Okay, so children are a special case because children are made up of more water than adults. So losses of water, dehydration in a child is a more worrisome symptom. So how can you tell if a child is in need of urgent care? It's one thing Dr. Sugarman and I wanted to talk about. I'm a physician trained in Colombia. I'm from the United States. I haven't done my residency here in the United States yet, so in the meantime, I'm doing volunteer work and externships and all kinds of things. And this is one thing that I love to do because I'm bilingual, and I'm also a certified medical interpreter, so I can help in that regard. So with children, what you want to look for are very young children under the age of 1 year old or 5 years old, sunken in eyes, they're lethargic or irritable. And if a mother says she's really concerned for her child, listen to her. Moms know when their child is sick. And they have been traveling. Normally, a child has been traveling for so long. They're probably pretty healthy because they've already made it through so much. If they, so you look for dehydration, sunken eyes, they're not wetting their diapers. They might be wearing their diaper for a long time because they don't have a lot of diapers, so the mom might not know. But if the mom might be paying attention, they're not wetting their diapers, they're not keeping food down because they're vomiting, they have diarrhea, they're not nursing well, they're irritable, or worse yet, they're lethargic, you'll want to take special note. And if the mom says, "I think my child's not doing well," pay close attention to that. What else we covered?
Yeah. Okay, so we also want to look at, people that are particularly vulnerable, that if they get sick, they might get sicker very quickly. So Anna talked about children, and I don't know if we have elderly, but elderly people would be another example of vulnerable people, and pregnant women, people that you have to move more quickly than, a young, healthy adult. So, and the other vulnerable population, if somebody mentions that they have a pre-existing medical condition, so if somebody says, "I'm diabetic, I ran out of my insulin, I have high blood pressure, HIV," things like that. So if people have a pre-existing medical condition, and then on top of that they get sick, or they've run out of their medicines during the journey or whatever, those are people that you want to pay special attention to. So on your handout is my cell phone, and I'm very happy to get calls. If any of you are nervous, I would much rather that you call me with a dumb question than not call me and somebody get very sick. So I don't mind being called. I do turn off my phone when I go to sleep, but usually my phone's on until about 10:30 or 11, and I think by then people have been situated. So you can call. If I don't answer, I would much prefer a text. And you can just quickly text me, I'm at the bus station, somebody has a fever, something like that. Just give me a clue what's going on. But, as long as I'm awake, I'm very happy to get phone calls. And, in the worst case, if I don't answer and you think somebody is critically ill, you can call 911, right? They are legal, right? They're not going to be picked up. So, if you have a baby or a pregnant woman, somebody's completely unresponsive, and you get panicked, you can call 911. It's fine. It's really okay. pregnant women, they can get sicker more quickly. I mean, we do talk about pregnant women.
All I wanted to say is any pregnant woman will obviously need their prenatal care right away as soon as possible. So to hook up with Kate's clinic and as well as very small babies, they will need their monthly or bi-monthly checkups. So those people will need to see a doctor whether or not they are feeling ill when you see them.
So Direct Support for Immigrants has existed for more than 2 years. The Tacoma Park mobilization was formed after the Trump election, and so we started working with immigrants pretty soon after Trump was elected. We've been working in the community in kind of 2 ways. One is to provide accompaniment to immigration court, kind of brief services, so maybe helping connect someone to a medical service provider or a legal service provider, or immigration court accompaniment. So those are kind of like 1 or 2 time things that we do with someone. And then secondly, we have been taking a handful of cases more in depth and working with, usually they'll come to us with an immigration court issue, but oftentimes there will be many other issues that they're dealing with also. They could range from custody issues to needing food to issues with the school, or, so usually we'll take them and help with their immigration issues and try to make sure that that piece is taken care of, but also we help with other services as well. And we see ourselves as a connector to resources in the community, so we're really educating people on what exists in the community, how things work here, how the systems work, whether it's the legal system or the school system or anything, and then helping connect them into the resources that they can use for the rest of their lives, so that they can become independent and be using those services on their own. So this bus project, TIA Silver Spring, is really exciting for us because we see this as an opportunity to kind of intervene at the moment that people are arriving. Sometimes what will happen is someone will arrive, cases that we've seen in the past, and they hear about the 1-year asylum deadline that they need to file their application for asylum for, but they don't really know how to get help and they don't have any money to hire a lawyer, and then the 1-year deadline passes, and then their chances get much, much harder in immigration court. So the exciting thing about greeting them at the bus station is we know that they've pretty much, if they're a family, they've just arrived, and if they have gone through the immigration court bond system, it's probably been 2 months that they've been here, 2 to 3 months, so they still have another 9 months to work on their immigration case for this critical 1-year deadline for filing for asylum. So one of the key things that we want to be able to do for people is to explain how that court process works and to refer them out to nonprofit legal service providers or private attorneys. There's a distinction, and immigrants are often confused about ICE and immigration court. So often the parents that need to go for ICE check-ins actually think that that's, a court date for themselves. It's not. So ICE is responsible for kind of supervising and enforcing and making sure that people are not breaking the law here, but that is very separate from the justice system. And the justice system is where they will have their chance to actually apply for immigration relief and have the ability to live here with a green card at one point. So it's important that we can explain these things to them, so we're trying to, as many people come through the bus station, we would love to be able to sit down with every single one of them and kind of explain the difference between ICE and immigration court, and then what their responsibilities are and what they'll need to do to make sure they're complying with both and have the best chance for their immigration cases. We will also help get them to a nonprofit service provider. So we've already taken a few people we've tried Catholic Charities, although they didn't have enough space the day we took them. We've gotten someone to CASA through this bus project to get a legal intake and a private attorney as well. So we've already started connecting people to attorneys who can review their case and do a legal consult with them and advise them on what path they should take, whether they should be applying for asylum, in which case can that nonprofit take it on pro bono. There's usually a very low chance that they will, and if they can't though, they'll know that they need to either hire a private attorney or they can do the asylum application on their own if they need to, and that's something we can help explain to them. So that's kind of the first piece, is helping them understand their immigration case and ICE. And then secondly, transportation. So for the parents and children that have ICE check-ins, anyone who has given ICE or DHS an address in Maryland will have their ICE check-in scheduled for Baltimore. It's in the same building as immigration court, so that's also why it's confusing to people, because they think they're going to court, but they're actually just going to ICE. It's the federal building in Baltimore. It can be very expensive to get there, so usually a taxi driver will charge them $100 for a round trip, or they will ask their sponsor, the person that they're staying with, or family or friend, to take them, and usually that will mean that that person will need to miss a day of work, in addition to the expense of getting them to court. Parking is very expensive once you get there. So it's a huge cost for people to even get to their ICE check-in. Not just that, but when they get there, the system is like a bureaucratic, ugly mess, and if you're an immigrant that just arrived in this country, you've already gone through detention and kind of this process that is not friendly or cares about you, really. And then the ICE check-in process is also similarly kind of uncaring, right? Like they're there to make sure that people have arrived at their destination. They ask you to fill out paperwork. The paperwork is very hard to read. The writing in Spanish is very slight and small. And then there's no one there that speaks Spanish, and they're not explaining, what you're supposed to be doing. They tell you eventually, after you finish your paperwork, they tell you to go wait in the lobby. You don't know how long you're waiting there. Random names will be called in the lobby, so I'm just giving you kind of some of the details because the process is not very nice. So one of the roles that we need to fill is helping accompany people on this journey to their ICE check-in, at least for the first one, and then sometimes beyond, once they have their second or further one, they might be able to do it independently. So if you go to the page in your training on rides to Baltimore,
Page 9.
so we are collaborating with Sanctuary DMV, which is another organization that is working to help immigrants in this area. DMV standing for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And they have a very comprehensive training for accompaniment. So accompaniment to ICE check-ins or accompaniment to court dates. So we're partnering with them already, and when we know that we need to accompany someone to an ICE check-in, we'll be contacting them, and they have a network of already trained volunteers. Is anyone here trained already with Sanctuary DMV for accompaniment? Okay, so there's a couple of you. So you guys would already, if we sent out a notice, you would already be hearing from them that we need a ride, and that would be, through this project. But if you haven't been trained by Sanctuary DMV, you still have an opportunity to provide this role, and all of the details are here. It generally is a full morning into the early afternoon. In this case, So Sanctuary DMV trains for all types of accompaniment, and sometimes there's very high-risk accompaniments where the people who go to ICE could be detained that same day. The people that we're working with through the bus project are not at a high risk for being detained. They've just been released because ICE does not have space in their detention facilities, and so they're going to their first check-in. They're not going to be detained. I mean, the likelihood is very, very, high that they're not going to be detained at that check-in. So although Sanctuary DMV's training is much more complex to worry about all of these other issues, this specific project is not a high risk. But you would need to leave this area maybe 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. to go pick up the immigrant and their child or children, and then drive them to Baltimore. I think the ICE office opens at 8:30, but people are seeing appointment times of 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter what their appointment time is. When you arrive, you would go straight up to the ICE office and get the paperwork. You would fill that out, or the immigrant would fill that out, and then you would be sent down to the lobby to wait. In the lobby, you're just waiting, and eventually someone is going to come out and either tell you that you have a new date to come back in 6 months or even a year, or if for parents with the ankle bracelets that I mentioned before, they're often being told that they need to report immediately, and we interpret that to mean within the next 24 hours to a more intensive supervision, which is usually the one that we've been seeing is on Georgia Avenue here in Silver Spring. We would not expect you as the accompanier to then drive to that Georgia Avenue location. You would contact me or Angela, who were on the flyer. Angela and I are the ones on the flyer. And you would let us know that this person needs to go to the intensive supervision the next day, and we would help get someone to go with them. That situation is a little bit different, so I'm not going to go into detail here, but you would contact us and let us know that that needed to happen. So in terms of accompanying to Baltimore, it's kind of a long morning, and when you're waiting in the lobby, it's really nice if you can bring some fruit to share with the people that you're with, or some coloring books, or some little books for the kids to look at or read. It is a nice time to be able to interact with the families, and there will be lots of other people there waiting as well, so you might even get to know some of the other people there as well. If you don't speak Spanish, obviously, that's difficult, but you could download Google Translate is really good. And then an app that we recommend for people who want to learn a language, so if you want to learn Spanish, or if the person that you're with wants to learn English, I would recommend the app Duolingo, and I think that's in the material as well. Parking is expensive. I would recommend using Spot Hero the night before, or even if you know a few days in advance, use it as soon as you can, because sometimes the parking lots will get filled up. It will be much cheaper to try to find a lot through Spot Hero than to actually park in the federal building lot, because they charge like $32.
Arena parking on Howard Street is usually like
Okay, arena parking.
on Howard
I've
Street.
seen Spot Hero spots for like $13, so you might even be able to beat that, but yeah.
Yeah, when I was up there, there's the Days Inn spot that I got through Spot Hero, the Days Inn pro. I was there for 3 hours, it's like $13.
Okay, so days in for
It's
$13
like a
if you
day,
go through Spot
like a
Hero.
block and a half from the
Yeah.
office.
If you're really happy to give rides, but that amount of money for parking is too much, we can also reimburse you through DSI funds if it's an immigrant that came through TIA Silver Spring with the bus project. So please don't worry about the payment. If you need reimbursement, you are welcome to seek reimbursement through us. And you would just send me the receipt for your parking, and you could either email that or text message me. I think I included the information somewhere in here.
There's a contact list on page 13.
And then just lastly, I think sometimes we try to be advocates, and that could mean, personally for me, that could mean like if I'm at a restaurant and my food comes out cold, I might need to say, oh, my food is cold, do you mind sending it back and heating it up or something? In this case, though, we don't wanna kind of do these complaining advocacy types of behaviors. Like, we really need to let the system work like it is and not do any complaining with ICE officials or anyone in the federal building, the security people or whoever it is. We really need to just follow the rules and make sure that we're not drawing any attention to this immigrant that we're accompanying. And so that they have the best chances of, you know, being just seen as the person that they are and not someone who has kind of a complaining friend along with them. Even though we do, you know, I think in some ways we would really want to, right? We would want to speak up for the injustices of how they might be being treated, but that's not the time and place. So if you do feel like there's anything that you're concerned about that happened, or if there's a civil rights violation that's happening to an immigrant that you're accompanying, please do let us know as soon as possible, so that we can follow up and help advocate in other ways, but we're not going to do that right then and there in the court building. If you really feel concerned, you know, feel free to contact me and Angela when you're there in Baltimore and just try to give us a ring and see if you can talk it through with us. But if not, contact us later also. Lastly, just I think you may have learned things about the immigration court system here today that you might want to share with the immigrant then, but you might be operating only with part of the information, so you also don't want to kind of give advice or tell people what they need to do with their case or anything like that. We have very specifically trained volunteers, and that's actually something I'm going to talk about next, who will be working one-on-one with people and kind of explaining how things work. If you are accompanying someone to Baltimore, please don't try to like explain the whole court system and or explain unless you've been trained by us to do that. Okay.
For example, I do more with the schools. And so when I'm talking to people and I'm really not sure what's going on with what they're saying and I don't really know the answer, I'll take notes and then I'll call Lisa and say, this is what this family is telling me. I wanted to let you know what is it you think I should do. But I'll try and listen. I'll just ask a lot of questions and take notes and say, well, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. And I'll just let them talk and I will take careful notes.
So good point. You can always do that and then convey the information to us, and we're happy to follow up with whatever information might be needed. So I think that's it for the transportation to Baltimore. We are also able to arrange some other transportation, like sometimes to a medical checkup or the schools have very onerous requirements for enrolling in school, so we might be doing some of that as well. So if you're interested in doing like every once in a while rides like that, please let us know on the form that you fill out also, that you might not just be interested in accompanying to Baltimore, but that you would be willing to give other rides, usually during the daytime, during the week. And then the last thing on the brochure is the clothing assistance. So one thing that we've noticed is that people are coming with very little. So often they could be released from detention with just one outfit that they're wearing. And then maybe they've picked up some clothing along the way from other volunteers through this transportation network. But often clothing is a need, and shoes, particularly migrants coming from Central America who arrive in this type of weather, boots and things like that. So another thing that we're trying to do is find local resources to be able to provide those things, but we're also collecting. I know that all of you guys signed up through email, I hope, so if we have your email, we might every once in a while email and be like, we're looking for these certain items, we're collecting these certain items for someone, and it might not just be clothing, it might be some household items as well, but that's another service that we're hoping to provide.
And one reason why it's so important is a lot of immigrants realize that when they come here, if they don't have residence in Montgomery County or Prince George's County, they can't avail themselves of public services unless they have an address or unless they have a job or they can prove that they've been a resident for a certain amount of time. So some of these things really are pressing issues because they can't use the services that are available to the rest of us if we were to lose our jobs, for example.
And that's kind of why it's a little bit more pressing. I've also met a lot of immigrants recently who don't want to make any noise. They don't want to bring attention to themselves because they're afraid that that will hurt their case. Whether that's true or not, that's their belief. And so they want to fly under the radar as much as possible because they don't want to seem like they're a burden to the system. So that's tricky. I've had that with students enrolling in school, a child who has some very special needs, and the parents are worried that this will hurt their opportunity to get any kind of legal status because they're using more services than other people might be, which is certainly not supposed to be the case, but that is sort of the idea that people have, and it may in the end maybe, you know, who knows? So that's why if you see those emails and we ask for things there, that's kind of why.
The irony of that particular situation is that if that mom got detained, she actually may have a better chance of winning her case because a child with special needs may not be able to receive the services in their country, so the immigration court judge is more likely to let them stay in the country. And that's why a good consult with an attorney is so important, so that they can explain these things to that mom, and that she can feel free of the fears that she has. Okay, so the last role that we're still recruiting for is this kind of more long-term follow-up role. And so this would be just for Spanish speakers at this point. We actually have had one migrant that had pretty good English, so there's a chance that we could need a few English speakers, but right now the big need is Spanish speakers. And that person, if you're willing to sign up for a follow-up role, or if you know a Spanish speaker who could, it would require a couple hours of training with us on all of the different things that we might encounter and different resources that we have for dealing with those things. And then also shadowing, so accompanying me or Angela or someone else on kind of that initial interview that we would have with an immigrant to kind of understand what their case is like and what needs they might have. So you would get trained, and then there would be accompaniment, and then we would always be available for follow-up questions. You know, that just like Angela said, if she's not sure about something, she'll take notes on it and then connect with me. I might even call the person myself to kind of ask a few more questions, and then we'll figure out what the plan is from there. A lot of the follow-up work can be done over the phone. I mean, I think you always need to meet the person first and like sit down with them and really get to know what the issues are. But once you've done that initial interview, you can do quite a bit of follow-up just on the phone. You know, finding out what service is available, when they need to go, and then we can help arrange rides as well. Like, so you wouldn't necessarily have to be the same person that's giving them a ride to that service. So that's kind of another role that we're looking for. I think that's it for me.
As you've heard, there are many needs, and when we first started this, we did a quick fundraising campaign that was over in 2 days. People were so generous, it was really wonderful, and that allowed us to get started with our bags. But who knows how long this will go on? It could be months or longer, and so we're interested in keeping up the supplies that we might need. So there's a couple different things. Obviously, there's fundraising for the incidentals that Lisa had mentioned, such as parking in Baltimore or legal fees, or other, besides supplies, there's these other needs for funds. So if you can do that, that would be tremendous. If you can organize something. We also, again, the supply piece, in terms of the bags and what we provide to the migrants when we meet them at the bus, if you could do like a drive for supplies. We have a list it's in here, but you'll see it when you go over there what the items are that we need. So through your church or mosque or synagogue, those are great places. People are wanting to do things, and so having, putting together 50 bags and 50 add-on packs would be tremendous. So if you could just note on your little list, if that's something that you could do, that would be terrific. And you know, you could talk to myself and to Jamie regarding the supplies if you have any questions. And the fundraising we do all through DSI, which is, as Lisa mentioned, a nonprofit, a 501c3. So there's a tax benefit, and everybody doesn't have to worry about it's, you know, legit. So, and then the other thing I was going to say about the roles, there you'll see there's other and just blank. So if you have, there's all sorts of needs, and we never know what's going to pop up. So, for instance, the notary. If you're a notary, you know, we're looking for storage space in Silver Spring. Right now, we're like in somebody's house and somebody else's basement, and so if somebody has access to, you know, a space, it doesn't have to be like a storage space, but, or a warehouse or anything, but just a space, that would be terrific. Or if you know somebody you can put us in touch with, that would be terrific. But if any, we're just gonna put our wish list out there. If anybody knows of or anybody has any pro bono legal experience, that would be terrific, because that's a huge need, obviously. So that's kind of, so, and anything you might think of that we haven't thought of, we'll probably run into at some point. So if you have connections, or if you have some specialty, that would be terrific.
Another stretch, a lot of people are really having a hard time finding housing. So they will rent a room in your house. They will be very quiet, I'm sure, as much as they can, but people are really having a hard time finding a place to live right now. There's so many people who are coming out of these prisons and needing a place that they can afford, and a lot of them are really coming with nothing.
So just an understanding that some flexibility needs to and some understanding about, like, obviously we just have such limited control over all the different factors that are happening. So we appreciate that.
I just want to balance that with the fact that if you do step into one of these roles, it will be one of the most rewarding experiences that you have, because you will be making this connection with someone and offering assistance and humanity. You're going to be offering them the humanity of our country, and that is a huge thing. So,
yes.
So I think Catholic Charities calls it, or Catholic, what did you say?
The Catholic workers.
Catholic
Radical
workers call it radical hospitality. Okay, that means, radical means you're willing to go outside of what you normally, you know, you might not get to have dinner when you thought you would, or you might not get home and get enough sleep, but, you know, compared with these people, it's like, you know, you can set aside, I think we all sort of feel like, you know, we can set aside stuff because these people are desperate, and we have empathy for them. They're in a very vulnerable situation, and so that's why I think this project, we've been so patient with each other, and we've worked as a team so well so far with just a few of us trying to pitch in and do it. And so that's, you know, that's the sort of person that we're looking for. You just got to get in there and pitch in and just be nice, you know, just be nice to us and to each other, and we'll get it done. Because there's always, I mean, you know, my husband was like willing to drive, you know, he said, I'll go with you to drive to Baltimore to get some people that were stranded. And I will tell you guys too that what has happened with the weather in the last couple of days, so what do you think happened to people on the buses? They got stuck. So all through Richmond, Charlottesville, and now Baltimore, all of people like us took these people home. They took them home, they're in their houses right now because they can't, all the buses were canceled. So they didn't get to go. And this is what people are doing in all of these different stations. It's people that are just pitching in and doing what needs to be done right at the last minute, you know, without any warning, just who can do this. And so if you're on any of our lists, we're gonna be begging you all the time to do stuff. So whichever list you sign up for, we still gonna probably beg you to do some other stuff. Okay.
As we said before, we're working on storage. A really important thing when you're done here, if you think that you're going to definitely do this, please come over to this table so we can talk to you about the supplies. And right now it is myself and Roxanne are housing supplies. So you will most likely get sent to Roxanne's house because that's going to be our more permanent location, and she's off of Dale Drive in Silver Spring. Once you're signed up for that, you'll get more information on it. But please don't walk out of this room without coming over if you have a minute, because the supplies can be confusing, and we want to make it as straightforward as possible.
And you can also set yourself up with supplies ahead of time. I was talking to Tammy about it before. You don't, even though I said you should build in time to go get supplies, I'm just saying if you want to do it that way, you can. If you want to go and get exactly what you know or what you think you need, but you can also just get yourself set up ahead of time and get like 5 adult bags and a gigantic, toolkit of all of our extra stuff. Keep it at your house, keep it in your trunk. And you don't have to go to the supply house that often, especially if you're only going to work every other week. Just refill occasionally the stuff that you've given out. You don't want to show up with no diapers or something. So keep track of your own stuff, but you don't have to come get it every time. You're in charge of your own supplies. But we don't post on social media about this project, except in a very sort of vague way. So you're not going to say Greyhound. We don't want people to know that we're meeting buses, because all we need is one hater. That's all we need, and that happened in El Paso. There's some asshole coming to the station every day and bugging people. And there are people in Maryland that we've dealt with before that are an anti-immigrant group. They're called Save Maryland. They're horrible. And if they know, they will show up. They live for this stuff. So we don't, you can collect coats for recently detained immigrants or something like that.
Recently, okay, great. I just wanted to know what to say about this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is just a heads up on my personal experience driving on Fenton lately. There's traffic. They're doing construction right there, so traffic backs up. And I'm notoriously late, so it can put you on like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's also the time the schools get out, and so I've been caught in that too. It gets bad.
Thank you. Any other questions? Awesome. Okay. Yeah, we're going to be milling about, and Jamie's going to be at the supply table. So thank you all so much for coming. Thanks to John for filming this so that we can provide it for the other trainees and of course historical comment and all of you. Thank you. And this team is amazing. You all have no idea about the volunteers and these ladies and gentlemen who have been helping. Thanks.